Growing up on the river really set my life in motion. I learned how to swim and fish and do all sorts of things along the river. And it has really helped define who I am, including my career.
I've lived here, 26 years in the lower river, and you see changes over that period of time. And some of it's good and some of it's scary.
What I'm seeing is every cove in this area has been affected. You can just name all of them up and down the river.
I think this is a huge issue. I think it's huge because it has the ability to fundamentally change the very thing that the Connecticut River estuary has come to be known for, which is that whole system of intact and diverse salt, brackish, and freshwater tidal marshes.
When the project started, it was brought to me by Margot Burns at RiverCog. She asked me to take a look at this Hydrilla issue and help these 12 towns who border the Connecticut River. It was an easy yes for us to take on this project and form an environmental review team process, which brings together experts within the state, outside of the state, to provide expertise on the Hydrilla issue.
My name is Greg Bugbee. I'm a scientist with the Connecticut Agricultural Experiment Station in New Haven, Connecticut. I am in the Department of Environmental Sciences, and I run the invasive aquatic plant program. Hydrilla is what's called a submersed plant. It is considered the worst aquatic submersed plant in the southern parts of the United States, Florida particularly. Because it's submersed, you can't just pull it out that easily. It has a root system that we believe is perennial, or at least structures called either turions or tubers, which will be in the sediment, which lasts from year to year. And so this particular strain is unique to the Connecticut River. As far as we know, it's not been found anywhere in North America, and appears to be much more aggressive and robust than anything we've seen before.
Invasive species have been in Connecticut waters for many years, and sometimes they have come through just natural dispersion. They came downstream. Sometimes a boater transported it into from one water body to another. People sometimes, if they're finished with their fish tank, with their aquarium, and they'll dump their fish, their goldfish, their live plants, whatever that they have in their tank, if they dump it and they think that they're liberating the fish or the plant, that can cause a new population of invasive plants that are in Connecticut waters. It is a severe problem, and where it is in the river, it is in many cases what's called a monostand of thick vegetation. We've had our survey boat in there, and we could not get out without being pulled out. It's that dense.
My name is Joe Standard. I'm a boater. I'm lucky enough to have a dock where I keep my boat here on Selden Cove. We saw some Hydrilla last summer. You could see it looking down into the water. I had no idea that it would explode to this extent. They're really blockades. They're not weeds that you can kind of work your way through. Once they take over, as they have in the Selden Cove here, it becomes really impossible to boat. For me to leave the dock and go down and join the Connecticut River, I have to go through quite a stretch of the Hydrilla, and by the time I get to the little channel there, my prop is totally fouled. I have to stop and pick it off. So the fear is all of this stuff will float down further down the river and recolonize. Engine is straining. We get to by the time I get to the dock, I really have no steerage because the prop and engine are so fouled. And then I have to clean my prop and start the process all over again whenever next I go out.
What happens with Hydrilla is that it grows so thickly, there's such massive growths of it under the surface that it clogs up channels, and it makes it impossible to have natural water exchange, new water to come into a cove. The result is that the cove becomes stagnant as the hydrilla starts to deteriorate and die off each year. What happens is it extracts oxygen from the water, and so the dissolved oxygen in the water is depleted, and it makes it impossible both for other natural vegetation but also for marine life to exist in the cove.
With invasive species, particularly those that are in the water, we are concerned about the impact that can have on some of the native flora in and around the coves of the Connecticut River. Wild rice would be one example that could suffer. So if that plant were to be impacted, that's an example of the biodiversity being lost, and a chain of impacts to ducks and red-winged blackbirds and such.
It will have an impact on migratory waterfowl, so it'll have an impact on duck hunters.
You'll see ospreys, egrets, tons of bald eagles nesting, and these all rely on the river as a habitat. There's been algae that are associated specifically with hydrilla that have caused deaths of bald eagles and eagles down south.
Will have an impact on fishing.
People are going to stop fishing areas with hydrilla because you can't send a lure through it, you can't put your baited hook in it, you're just going to catch weeds.
There will also be an economic impact on the property owners. All you need to do is look around this cove and see how the hydrilla has locked in docks, and it becomes impossible for the property owners to use their waterfront property. It will depress their property values, and as a result, the municipalities will get less tax revenue.
We hired the Connecticut Center for Economic Analysis to do a study for us for amenity assets on the river. And there is about $1 billion worth of home value on this river. People come to this river because they want to live here.
There's one county in upstate New York where hydrilla has gotten hold in one of the Finger Lakes up there, and they estimate the cost is $10 million a year to manage it. And that is simply one county.
The first step was to document where this is and how bad a problem it is, and it is a very bad problem. We've completed the survey both last year and this year of the river for this plant, and we believe that it starts right in around Agawam, Massachusetts, right near Six Flags Amusement Park. It is throughout the river till the river gets too salty down near the shoreline, and then we don't see it anymore. Well, the way we do the mapping is we have a survey boat. We have actually two survey boats. We have computer systems on the boats that are hooked with very high-tech global positioning systems that give us what's called 1 meter accuracy or less, so we really can pinpoint where we are. And, you can see what's called a polygon is these areas around the patch, and then when you see these little like X's, that's a point. That's where it's just an individual plant. We rank it on a 1 to 5 scale, meaning there's 0 to 5. 5 would be to the surface, like the tide goes out a little bit here, this would be a 5. It's to the surface, and the majority of what we see in the river is a 5.
My name's Kelsey Wentling. I'm the river steward here at the Connecticut River Conservancy. We steward the entire Connecticut River, all 410 miles. Hydrilla can spread through fragmentation by getting onto boats or waterfowl.
If it gets on your boat, on your trailer, and you move, say you go to a different lake, you launch the boat and a fragment gets in the lake, it could take hold in the lake. And this is very, very concerning.
For us, our concern is the entire Connecticut River. So we are monitoring where it is and if it's going to be spreading upriver to Massachusetts, Vermont, and New Hampshire.
Motorboaters make it worse if they go through it. Their propellers fragment it, and it just multiplies, exponentially once the motorboat propeller has shredded it into little fragments. I'd say most people are totally unaware that this is an issue.
In 2018, 2 years ago, we commissioned Judy Preston from Yukon to do a management study and a survey of the invasives in Whalebone Cove. And she identified 7 different invasives that needed to be taken care of. Some she realized our small organization could handle and some not. Hydrilla was the #1 issue for her. Friends of Whalebone Cove has certainly realized that we're going to have to partner with some much bigger organizations. We have 100 members, we have some great volunteers, and we have a good board, but we're way too small to handle something this big.
The involvement of volunteers is essential to the management of any invasive species because it is simply too large a project for certainly for any local government, but even for the state government to take on. The costs can be enormous, and so volunteers coming and doing the work, helping out, can reduce the cost.
We, as government officials who represent taxpayers, need to find ways to harness our resources and use them more efficiently, and not put it on private philanthropy or business or citizen volunteers. I mean, that's all great, and that should be part of the mix, but I believe that containing this problem is going to take a government response.
I certainly think making people aware of the problem and how it could negatively affect or does negatively affect folks in the area, whether it's tourism, which is huge for this area of Connecticut, or property values, or boating. It's really a problem it's here and it's going to go to additional places. So I think the more we educate people, the more we educate boaters, the more we come together to try to figure out solutions is definitely a role of the state government, federal government, and definitely local government.
You know, one of the things people really need to start understanding about ecological crises is that they don't recognize political boundaries. They don't know or care about concepts like time and distance, and so the entire river will be at stake. And I think it behooves all of our municipal leaders and state reps and senators like me to work together, because this is a plant which is going to move unless it is eradicated and stopped. And that's one of the reasons that we did the invasive species stamp.
In the state of Connecticut now, we have a fee that when you register your boat, it tacks on a $5 fee for in-state boaters and $25 fee, I believe, for out-of-state boaters. And that will go towards funding for grants for municipalities and others to work on aquatic invasive problems.
In the 2 years since I've been in office, it went from a potential issue to a major crisis. And I think that we need to have probably the Connecticut Ag Station be the quarterback and go ahead and figure out a plan before this really makes boating in the river impossible.
A lot of it we're going to require people to be aware of this issue. There's postings at the ramps mentioning this plant, and as well as other species. Go onto our webpage and go to the Connecticut River section, and you can get the app where you can actually look at the aerial view of the river. You can zoom in on sections, you can see all the polygons and points, and it makes it, I think, very easy for the public to determine what is where. We've teamed up with what I believe is essentially the national experts in hydrilla control. It's the North Carolina State University. We have taken hydrilla samples from the river, shipped them to North Carolina, where they are currently growing the Connecticut River hydrilla there for testing. They'll probably be doing some testing with some herbicides and maybe some other methods, maybe some biocontrols if we can find some. When you're trying to determine how well is a technique working, you want to determine, okay, not only how well is it controlling the hydrilla, but what is it doing to the eelgrass and maybe some other native species as well. The Connecticut DEP is going to play a huge role in here, not only with determining what will be allowed, also potentially be asked for funding, which is hard to come by.
DEEP is interested and worried about everything, you know, the fisheries habitat, the ecosystem of the river. We've worked with Kelsey and the Connecticut River Conservancy with our boat launch monitors, where they are either volunteers or some paid staff, and they go out to our public accesses, our boat launches, and try to interact with boaters and educate them on why it's important to prevent the spread, you know, teach them the clean, drain, dry method. We're hopeful that the future years, more volunteers will come forward and engage. They take 1 or 2 steps at the boat launch before their next launch. You know, that really can prevent the spread to other water bodies.
I went off to grad school someday hoping that I might be able to work on the Connecticut River, and lo and behold, that's what happened, and I feel very fortunate. But therefore, I also feel very loyal to the river and the natural resources that it represents. And during my years on the river, I've seen a lot of changes. We've cleaned it up. We've seen the forest rebound. We've seen all sorts of things happen. But obviously there's threats to this river that as a community, as a river community, we need to band together and face and deal with these threats.
Everybody who enjoys this river, and people who come to Gillette Castle, people who enjoy taking the ferry, people who recreate and, you know, take their boats out on the water, all of those people, if they have a better sense of what's at stake with this, and boy, there's a lot at stake with this, because imagine how easy this is to take with you on your boat.
Continued surveying, continued stewardship of areas that don't yet have hydrilla, public education, and collaboration with what needs to be done in the future to help mitigate the problem.
I'm glad that this project is trying to educate the public about this, because in 2 years, the calamity has gone from a potential problem to a real one, and in 2 more years, it's exponential. And the river is the cleanest it's been in hundreds of years. In my lifetime, I've seen it go from really a sort of stagnant, almost like a sewer, to a place that I'm happy to jump in and let my dog, you know, frolic in. And I don't want to see us go back to that. But this hydrilla has the power to wreak such ecological havoc on fish, on birds, that if we don't address this now, it may really come back to haunt us.